Imagine this scene: you are standing in the middle of a crowd, wearing a polite smile, saying things like, "I'm fine, I can handle it, anything is okay." No one is criticizing you. No one is attacking you. In fact, many people see you as emotionally stable, mature, and easy to get along with. And then, one night, without warning, you collapse. Not because of something big, but because of a trivial remark, a minor mistake. Your emotions spill over like a broken dam, completely out of control. How would you explain it? You've been holding on for so long. You've been controlling yourself. You've been doing the right thing. So why does emotional breakdown become the outcome? Maybe you tell yourself it's just stress. Maybe you blame your environment, your relationships, your bad luck. But what if the real cause has everything to do with how understanding, restrained, and accommodating you've been? Have you noticed that emotional breakdown rarely happens at your most painful moment, but instead, after you've been enduring for far too long? You weren't crushed by the world. You were slowly hollowed out by years of self-suppression. This is the unsettling, counterintuitive truth: emotional breakdown is actually the result of self-suppression. It is not a sign of weakness, but the inevitable consequence of denying yourself for too long. You suppress your anger to avoid conflict. You swallow your pain to avoid being a burden. You deny your desires to meet expectations. You keep reshaping yourself just to be accepted, approved, needed. But here's the question: when you silence your feelings again and again, do they really disappear? Or do they simply accumulate, ferment, and decay within your body and unconscious? If a person is never allowed to be angry, to refuse, to be difficult, do they still truly own their emotions? Or is their so-called rationality, maturity, and stability merely a gentle but persistent form of self-violence? And here's the more brutal question: if your life is built on constant self-suppression, then everything you are holding on to, your career, your relationships, your identity, your values, is it fulfilling you, or slowly consuming you? Perhaps you've never dared to ask yourself this. Perhaps you were afraid to. Because once you do, you realize, you thought you were controlling your emotions, when in fact, they were only waiting to explode. What's truly disturbing isn't the breakdown itself. It's that long before it happened, you had already grown used to not being yourself. And if emotional collapse is not an accident, but the inevitable result of prolonged self-suppression, then there's one question you can no longer avoid: when did you first learn to betray yourself? The most dangerous form of self-suppression is never a sudden decision. It is something you are quietly taught, a way of surviving. You didn't wake up one day and choose to deny your emotions. You simply learned, through repeated experiences, that expressing your true feelings comes at a cost. When you're angry, you're labeled emotional. When you refuse, you're called selfish. When you're sad, you're told to look on the bright side. When you're confused, you're urged to be more mature. So you adjust. Not because you want to, but because you realize, being yourself doesn't feel safe. Carl Jung once said something deeply unsettling: the persona is not falseness, it is a forced adaptation. The mask you wear, being rational, gentle, agreeable, is not a tool to deceive the world. It is the result of compromising with it just to survive. The problem is this: when a person lives behind a mask for too long, they forget that beneath it, there is still a real self. In psychology, this suppressed part has a name: the shadow. It is not evil. It is not inferior. It is simply everything that was never allowed to exist: your anger, impulses, desires, and raw emotions. You were taught to control it, correct it, deny it. But the shadow never disappears. It only goes underground, where it becomes more distorted and more extreme. Nietzsche captured this brutally: the instincts you suppress do not die. They take revenge. When you suppress yourself, emotions are not resolved. They simply lose their language, and are left with destruction. So emotions find other exits: persistent anxiety, chronic fatigue, sudden emptiness, overreacting to people close to you while feeling numb toward what truly matters, even physical symptoms, insomnia, pain, lingering discomfort. You call it stress. But the deeper truth is this: your inner system is paying the price for years of self-betrayal. What's more insidious is that modern society does not encourage awareness of this. It rewards suppression. Those who endure are praised as emotionally disciplined. Those who stay silent are called high in emotional intelligence. Those who always comply are labeled easy to get along with. So you mistake suppression for strength, instead of recognizing it as something slowly eroding your psychological structure. Schopenhauer believed that human suffering does not come primarily from external misfortune, but from the constant tearing between desire and reality. Self-suppression is how you create that tearing with your own hands. The more you deny your true feelings, the more intense the inner conflict becomes. The more normal you appear, the further you drift from yourself. So emotional breakdown is never sudden. It is simply the self you have ignored, silenced, and denied for years, finally demanding to be seen in a way you can no longer overlook. And the most unsettling part is not that you have a shadow. It's this: have you already grown used to being at war with it? What's truly frightening is not the emotional breakdown itself. It's this: by the time you notice, your life has already been rewritten. When you suppress yourself for years, you think you're just pushing through, or holding on. But the psyche never accepts temporary compromises. It keeps score. You begin to notice subtle changes. You work hard, yet no longer know what you're aiming for. Your life appears stable, but lacks genuine vitality. Your choices seem logical, yet feel emotionally hollow. You haven't failed. You've simply lost your inner navigation system. Psychology tells us this: emotions are not noise, they are signals. They exist to tell you when boundaries are crossed, when something matters, when harm is occurring. When you consistently ignore these signals, the brain activates a mechanism called dissociation. You distance yourself from your own feelings, as if living behind glass. You continue working, socializing, smiling, completing tasks, but you are no longer fully present. Then a deeper consequence emerges: you begin living passively. Your life is no longer driven by authentic desire, but by fear, habit, and social expectation. You choose safety over longing, approval over understanding, avoiding mistakes over avoiding regret. Jean-Paul Sartre called this condition bad faith, not lying to others, but lying to yourself. You tell yourself, "I'm fine, that's just how life is, everyone lives like this." Yet somewhere inside, you feel something shrinking. Even more dangerous, when large numbers of people live in self-suppression, it becomes a collective pathology. A society that suppresses emotion obsesses over efficiency while avoiding meaning, celebrates success while rejecting authenticity, promotes competition but lacks empathy. People clash, polarize, and lash out, without knowing what they're truly angry about. Because the real anger was never allowed to exist. So it gets displaced into cynicism, online hostility, extreme ideologies, into fear of difference and attacks on the vulnerable, into denial of the actual problem. Gabor Mate points out, a culture that does not allow emotional expression will inevitably produce addiction, anxiety, and emptiness. When you cannot bear your inner pain, you search for substitutes. Entertainment, consumption, workaholism, relationship dependency, endless stimulation, these are not the root problem. They are painkillers. And painkillers numb, but they do not heal. This is the paradox of modern life. Material abundance has never been greater, yet spiritual vitality is depleted, information flows endlessly, yet people feel increasingly disconnected from themselves. And you live inside this system. You thought you were only suppressing emotions. But in reality, you were slowly surrendering sovereignty over your life. Emotional breakdown is only the final signal. Before that moment, you have already paid, with time, direction, passion, and authenticity. So the real question is, if you keep living this way, are you sure that emotions are the only thing you'll lose? True rebellion is never an attack on the world. It is the moment you stop betraying yourself. That moment is usually quiet. No applause. No dramatic explosion. Just one day, you suddenly realize, continuing to suppress yourself is more terrifying than facing the truth. You ask a question you were once afraid to ask: what will I lose if I stop conforming? And then a far more dangerous one: what will I lose if I keep conforming? This is not an emotional issue. It is a matter of allegiance. Nietzsche warned that humanity's greatest danger is not suffering, but comfort without direction. Long-term self-suppression creates a false stability. You don't collapse, but you also don't live. So the real breakthrough is not becoming more positive, more disciplined, or more successful. It is a counterintuitive act. You begin allowing the feelings you locked away to exist. Not venting. Not losing control. But acknowledging. You admit you are angry. You admit you don't actually like certain parts of your life. You admit you've been compromising out of fear of abandonment. You admit you're not living the life you once imagined. This step appears weak. In reality, it is dangerous, because it destabilizes your entire old identity structure. Carl Jung called this moment the first confrontation with the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is the parts of you that were denied, suppressed, exiled. They sabotage you precisely because you refuse to see them. When you allow emotions to exist, you discover something unsettling. Many of your past, rational decisions, were driven by fear, not wisdom. This leads to the second shift. You begin redefining what good and right mean. No longer, will this make others happy? But, am I disappearing if I keep doing this? No longer, is this safer? But, does this way of living respect my experience of being alive? This is not selfishness. It is responsibility. Because someone who has never lived for themselves cannot truly live for anyone else. Those who truly understood life almost always passed through this lonely rebellion. Nietzsche broke with his era. Dostoevsky faced human darkness without romanticizing it. Van Gogh chose poverty over dulling his sensitivity. They did not avoid pain, they refused to exchange truth for comfort. You don't need to become them. But you must understand this: awakening is not about fitting in, it's about becoming real. When you stop suppressing yourself for the first time, the world will not immediately reward you. It may even punish you. But deep inside, something long absent begins to return, a sense of direction. You no longer constantly ask, am I doing this right? You feel a quiet, grounded certainty: I am standing on my own side. And this is only the beginning. Imagine this moment. You finally stop running, no more explaining, no more holding it together. You think you're about to collapse completely. But strangely, you don't. Instead, you feel something unfamiliar: calm. Not happiness. Not relief. But a deep, bone-level sense of being real. That's when you understand, your emotional breakdowns were never caused by weakness. They were caused by suppression lasting too long. You were never destroyed by emotions. You were drained by chronic self-denial. Here is the ultimate truth: emotional breakdown is not loss of control, it is the self refusing to remain buried. We're taught to be mature, reasonable, to control emotions. But almost no one tells you this: emotions are not enemies. They are signals. Anger signals violated boundaries. Sadness echoes lost meaning. Anxiety warns you've drifted from your inner direction. Emptiness is the inevitable result of living as someone you are not. When these signals are repeatedly suppressed, they don't disappear. They accumulate underground, until one day they erupt as collapse. Carl Jung said, "What you deny submits you, what you accept transforms you." What you call fate, breakdown, burnout, are merely different faces of the same thing, the true self you ignored for too long finally knocking on the last door. The worldview-shattering insight isn't how to fix emotions, but this reversal: you are not a machine to be repaired, you are a life asking to be heard. When you stop treating emotions as problems and start treating them as information, your entire logic of living changes. You stop asking, "How do I avoid breaking down?" and start asking, "Who am I actually living for?" You stop chasing surface stability and begin seeking inner alignment. You stop trading endurance for safety and choose truth over comfort. This doesn't mean life becomes painless. In fact, you'll feel pain more clearly. But this pain no longer destroys you. It guides you. You finally understand, emotions were never meant to ruin you, they were meant to save you. When you stop suppressing, when you begin paying the price for being real, the world may not become kinder. But something astonishing happens: you no longer need the world's permission to stand firm. You stop begging to be understood. You stop fearing rejection. You stop trading yourself for belonging. Because you have returned to the most fundamental truth, you allow yourself to exist. And that is the source of all growth, freedom, and strength. True freedom is not the absence of pain. It is no longer being at war with yourself.